Good afternoon to everybody who's attending at this moment the final session on Circular Plastic Conference. This is the last session and the closing session of a series which started at February, and it's all about circular plastic. And circular plastic, it's an important topic nowadays, because last week a report was published, which was written by the Minderoo Foundation, together with Wood Mackenzie, the London School of Economics and the Stockholm Environmental Institute. And they had some conclusions which are of importance for the session this afternoon. The report says that in the next 5 years, global capacity to produce virgin polymers for single-use plastic could grow by 30%. And due to that, in 2050, plastic is expected to account substantially, and the report says 5 to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And when you look at the amount of recycled polymers, that's nowadays quite low. In 2019, it was only 2%. So I would say we have still a long way to go, but we've started, and that's the good news. In this session today, we will look back at the, first, I want to give you some practical information. The session will be recorded for people who are not able to attend. Please mute your microphone and put your camera off. Questions can be asked in the chat. And for a perfect Zoom experience, you can go to the upper right corner. There you see view, and there you select side-by-side gallery view. And then you see slides and the person who is presenting. Okay, thank you. The program for this afternoon, we have 2 parts. Before the break, we will look back at the results of all the in-between sessions. And we will do that from 3 perspectives. That's from the technical point of view, from the value chain point of view, and from the view of legislation, standardization, and harmonization. We have a short break at 3:45, and around even 5 minutes before 4 o'clock, we will start with a panel discussion on the more societal impacts and questions around plastics. And we will do that with some representatives of 3 NGOs and 3 people from the who are partner in the program. The whole program is an initiative by the ISPT and DPI, and DPI stands for Dutch Polymer Institute, and the ISPT stands for the Institute of Sustainable Process Technology. But before we dive into the lessons learned, I want to introduce to you Ronald Korstagni. And Ronald, he is the program director of the Circular Plastic Initiative. And Ronald, if you can switch on your camera. Good afternoon, Ronald. Nice to have you here. And I want to ask to you, if you look back at the in-between sub-sessions, what is the major message you've picked up?
Yeah, thanks, Hans. First, in relation to organizing the conference, well, this has been very interesting, obviously. So it was an online experience. And I think in relation to that, we have been able to deliver a conference where it was possible to get easy access to sessions as well as to networking opportunities for the participants. And as an organization, to make this possible, this has been quite a learning experience with a lot of critical deadlines and a team effort to support each other in stress moments. And for that, I really want to thank the organizing team, which are all at the background. A lot of them you have not seen. So I really want to thank them for their dedication and expertise and their blood, sweat, and tears for this organizing this conference and making this happen. For a conference perspective, I think we have been able to address most of the aspects which are important in getting plastic circular. and that we have been gathering a community of players that are active and willing to move innovations into practice. We have learned during the conference that the challenges in getting plastic circular are very multidisciplinary and also need an integral approach involving the players in the value chain. So that is a very central thing, I think. Gathering the community is of eminent importance. And this conference has been a good start, I think. And we will also continue with it. And we will be committed to develop the community further in order to develop relevant initiatives and projects in boosting the circularity of plastics together with this community. So part of our plan is to make this happen and to develop a roadmap for the CPI, the Circular Plastics Initiative, which we will introduce later in this session. And also part of this plan is to organize a Circular Plastics Conference again in 2022. And we hope and actually expect that this will be a live version so that we can interact better, more direct with audience. And although we try to do our best with getting everybody involved as much as possible. So for now, I'm looking forward to this last and finalizing session, Hans, and I'm very happy that you are moderating this.
Okay, thank you, Ronald, especially for the kind words for the whole team. I agree fully. And we will come back to you later after the short before the break, because then we will dive into the question. Okay, what are the results which will you take with you and implement in the program based on the subsessions? Okay, first we want to look back at the technical challenges, and we will do that with three people. Martien Brandsma, she's the director of the National Test Center Circular Plastic, and their mission is making plastic waste 100% recyclable. We will do it with Kim Ragaert, and she's assistant professor and lectures material science and polymer science at Ghent University in Belgium, and Sascha Kersten, and he's professor at sustainable process technology at the University of Twente. But first, we want to ask Martine to tell us what you have picked up in the various sessions on the technical issues. Martine, please switch on your camera so we can see and hear you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Hans. And well, I'm very, very pleased that to be here today and to explain you a bit more about what has happened in the past 2.5 months during the conference on the technical sessions that took place. Basically, I think that we all agree that the challenges ahead in the circular plastic recycling chain are multidisciplinary, and Ronald already mentioned it. Technology and technological developments are a very important factor, but certainly not the only key to success. This was clearly presented in the whole program during the past months. So EPR, regulation, standardization, legislation, you see the terms on the slide, incentive schemes, but also product stewardship and behavior were topics at hand, besides technology, of course. Participants already agreed during the first session that collaboration and leadership in the chain is needed and crucial, and that more action instead of talking is needed. I guess this call to action also resulted in the short interactive discussions planned for today. So further action can really start first thing in the morning tomorrow. But what was discussed in the past 2 months? Well, with the current technological development efforts, as discussed during these sessions, we mainly focus on things like design for recycling. So in design for recycling, it is truly relevant to design products with recycling in mind. with an end market for recyclate actually in mind. One of the relevant things, therefore, is that for packaging, for example, we would like to move towards more single polymer materials. Another aspect that was discussed was about sorting and pre-treatment. So we discussed new characterization techniques, but also implementing data tools, new sensors, look into other fields where, for example, technologies like artificial intelligence are already being applied for a couple of years. How can we translate those technologies into characterization and sorting, for example? Radical new sorting processes like magnetic density separation. So actually new paradigms brought into this field by people coming from other backgrounds and other domains. What came across was that effective sorting and purification of streams is instrumental to provide the relevant feedstock for further steps in recycling and for the different recycling routes. And for these different recycling routes, we had a session on contaminants and, for example, prevention or actually efficient separation of contaminants by means of pyrolysis. Of course, Sasha is attending today to answer some of these questions. But also dissolution technologies, the option to remove certain contaminants, but also odors by means of advanced washing and extrusion technologies in combination with stripping and degassing in the extrusion process. As I said, purification is key for all the different recycling routes. We all know the term, and I will say it out loud, shit in is shit out. So basically we need to make sure that we clean up these streams. Next slide, please. A recent study by Wageningen University, Twente University and Ghent University showed that the potential of plastic packaging recycling rates have a theoretical circularity limit at 72% recycling rate with a 97% purity. In their study, they have like a long-lasting track record in studying this domain. In their study, they took into account multiple improvement measures that can be taken throughout the whole chain for the next 5 years. So in terms of packaging design, collection, sorting, but also recycling. Furthermore, the study also implies that all the stakeholders would need to implement these drastic and coordinated measures, but also invest. In the end, the model revealed that when uncoordinated measures are being taken by one single stakeholder or group of stakeholders, only a limited increase in circularity can be achieved. So hence the combination of these improvements in a synergetic improvement environment is crucial. So again, collaboration. So how do we get into action? Well, we are working on all kinds of technological solutions. And throughout this process, we need to be constantly aware about the fact that every player in the chain needs to take their own responsibility. And I think that we need to keep each other continuously aware of that. Specifically since, as we already know, choices made, for example, by brand owners in the design or the material choice, but also the behavior of the consumers can make in the end also our technological efforts much more successful. And that's how I would like to start with the panel discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Martine. I would ask Kim and Sasha to put their cameras on. Okay, thank you, Martine, for your broad overview. And what you tell us that quite a lot has to be organized, and the key word is collaboration. Kim, I want to start with you and ask you, Martine mentions a lot of things, a lot of topics which need to be developed further. If you can pick one which is for you the most important, what would you choose?
If I pick one which is important and which I think Martine and Sasha will not bring forward, I would like to stick in the design for recyclability corner. I think it would be really impressive and really useful if we could design replacements for materials or components that are now very troublesome. And I'm thinking about aluminized polypropylene, like for ships bags, for example, if we could find something to replace that aluminum layer, or if we could find something to replace PVC and PVDC in food packaging, which is a disturbance for both mechanical and chemical recycling, I think that would be very meaningful.
Okay, thank you. One question about that. Are there other products available or implemented at the market which have been designed for recyclability at the moment?
Yes, there's quite a few moves going on. Stand-up pouches is now something which is really changing. So the ones in which you have not food, but for example, detergent blocks for your dishwasher. These are moving now from PET, PE combinations and some barrier layers to more mono polyethylene to have better recyclability. So that's an excellent example. Another example is detergent bottles, which for a long time were in really dark colors, dark purple, dark blue, black, which are not that easy to sort out automatically. And there, if you go to the store today, you can see that the detergent bottle has become translucent to some degree, and they put the fancy color in the detergent itself. So also that for recycling is actually an improvement.
Okay, okay. Instead of coloring the bottle black, for instance, they color the liquid inside. A nice example. Thank you, Kim. Sasha, you've heard also quite a lot of topics which were mentioned by Martina. If you would pick one, which would be your favorite to work on?
Yeah, favorite is a big word, Hans. It's the most complicated one, I would say. I would like to bring into the discussion the pyrolysis, so the thermal recycling of plastic waste. Let's call it the household waste that we all actually have in our own houses. Maybe as a bit of a historical account, this recycling of plastic is not new. This was already studied back in the 90s, even the 80s of the last century. Back then, the concept was to get in a single step to get polymers back to their monomers. What was studied back then was actually the pyrolysis, so the thermal degradation of very clean polymers, so clean PE or clean PP or whatever you have. The last years, we have seen quite some publications and quite some work on polymers that you would actually have if you collect the plastic waste from households. And there, I think we have seen that this is quite complicated as a feedstock. The analytics are not easy at all. I've been trying that myself for the last year to get a good number, for instance, of the chlorine content of such a stream. Not easy at all. And after that, this stream is terribly complicated, contains many, many different fractions. And if you would all like to convert them in the same machine, that's a big challenge ahead. So if I would like to, if your question is, what would you like to work on? This is a challenge that I would really like to pick up.
Hmm. And is that part of the CPI program at the moment to work on? Yeah,
it is. We selected one specific feed stream. It's called DKR 350. It's a standard, as I understand. We are using all kinds of washing protocols for that particular feed stream. And that is being pyrolyzed and also, let's say, compared to what you would see if you would pyrolyze, let's say, the individual compounds of that stream. Mm-hmm. And one thing I can tell that if you know how the individual compounds behave in your conversion, you still do not know how the mixture behaves. Mm-hmm. So that is something that we really have to find out in the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I can not being an expert, I have an image of design for recyclability that's for me quite easy to understand. But pyrolysis, which problem in the circular plastic chain will be solved by pyrolysis, Sasha?
Okay, we have to take one step back. See, this pyrolysis technology is actually a part of a whole chain that we are, let's say, developing now. And the chain is very simply described as in we do collect plastic waste or plastic after use. This plastic, for some reason, is not suited anymore for mechanical recycling. Then we go for chemical recycling. Pyrolysis is thermochemical recycling. And in that step, the plastic waste is converted into a liquid. And in the envisaged plan, this liquid is then, let's say, reconverted into plastics. Of course, that is simply said. But in the idea that we are having, that many people are having at the moment, this liquid stream is then fed after purification to, for instance, a naphtha cracker, which again produces ethylene, and then this ethylene can go along in the stream towards, for instance, polyethylene. That's the positioning. Yeah.
Okay, so I imagine that Shell, Dow, SABIC are knocking at your door in order to find the answers. So they have an alternative feedstock for naphtha.
Indeed, all these parties are involved in our projects, and of course they're also involved in other projects. They're doing their own developments, but this is one of the routes that, well, I know that many companies are investigating at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Martine, being the director of the Circular Plastic Test Center, is there a specific topic you would ask to Kim or to Sasha to work on, so that it would be more easy from your point of view in the value chain to recycle the plastics?
Well, that's a really broad question. Well, basically, one of the holy grails, I think everybody in the market and in the research field is looking into is how we can come to a closed loop recycling chain for food packaging materials, because these food packaging materials that we all throw away as a consumer are quite a large part of the total amount of plastic packaging that we find in the household waste streams. And basically, at this point, only the materials from the refund scheme are actually able to get back into a food application. And I think, and also Kim is already working quite hard on that, is how can we sort how can we sort more pure? That's the stuff that we're working on. So identifying materials, detecting materials, and classifying materials, whether it has a food heritage, but also in terms of contaminations, what is and what is not allowed in relation to, in the end, also legislation and food safety. I think that there are the big challenges ahead, right, Kim?
Yeah, absolutely. Food contact approval and legislation for recycled plastics is an extremely nasty swamp to go into, and it's very easy to sink away. As you say, bottle PET from deposit schemes works very well. For other materials, there are, not to speak of any approvals going around. PET has it going easy in the sense that apart from it also not absorbing very easily components, you know that if you are getting a bottle in your recycling scheme, this was a food contact bottle. Every PET bottle going onto the market is for food contact. Milk bottles, which is HDP, are not that easy because HDP bottles can also be for shampoo or can also be for detergent. So you do not have a guarantee that if you are able to sort out your PE bottles that you have all food grade material, while you do have that for PET. So that's a very practical hurdle which needs to be taken, but there are some initiatives like the Holy Grail, which would allow us to sort out food grade versus non-food grade. We're still not there yet, but that would be a very significant step, I think.
Kim, you mentioned the word very nasty. What does it make so nasty?
Well, first of all, it's not entirely clear. There are no end of waste criteria for plastics. So it's very difficult to identify exactly when you are moving from waste legislation to REACH legislation for new products. There's really this gray zone there. It's also very unclear when you make an EFSA application, what exactly it is EFSA would like you to put in there. And it takes very long. It takes multiple years, even if you have a decent file.
I hear somebody talking at the background somewhere. Okay, please, Kim, continue.
I was just muted by the hosts. This is a particular microaggression.
Me too. They want us to stop talking, I guess.
No.
Yeah, so there's a few gaps there in legislation, which are only very, very slowly being filled, and that doesn't help either.
Okay. So there you see the complexity of closing the loop of circular plastic. That it's not only a technical question, it's a matter of collaboration between all the parties in value chain. It has to do with legislation also, and we will come back to that later. Looking at the time schedule, we have to end this part of the session. And unless there is one final remark one of you wants to make, if not, then we continue with the next part of the program. And I want to thank you very much for your contribution.
Now, there is one question from the audience at this moment.
Okay.
And it was addressed to Kim. At least I see one question here. It's from Jean-Paul
coming back to answer
okay.
This, if you want me to.
I will ask Ronald to switch on your camera also, because now you're talking, and then we can see who is talking, and Kim also. And Ronald, please repeat the question.
I'm sorry.
I can see the question in front of me. It's from Jean-Paul Lange.
Oh, you have to unmute, Ronald.
And maybe I'll just pick it up. So Jean-Paul asked, PET bottle have been used for food contact, but they may also have seen other uses before being disposed of. So no guarantee on non-contamination. That is true. And part of your food approval process is also proving how you can decontaminate contaminations that are also there. Maybe in the same spirit, something which might be threatening to the food contact recycling of PET bottle is that there's a trend going on for cosmetics to be packaged now also in PET bottles. And that might actually endanger this guarantee we can give that 95% of PET bottle is from food contact. So just wanted to put that out there as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Kim, for your contribution. Then we continue with the next topic that is about legislation, harmonization, and standardization. It was also mentioned. We have two speakers, Anne-Gaëlle Gayot, and she is Senior Manager, Consumer and Environmental Affairs for Plastic Europe. And Plastic Europe is the association and represents plastic manufacturers active in the Europe plastic industry. And Juan Manuel Bañez Romero, I do hope that I pronounce it well, but probably not. He's working for Amcor, and Amcor is a global leader in developing and producing responsible packaging for all kinds of applications. And Anne-Gaëlle, very welcome, and you switched on your camera already because you were going to tell us something about what has been discussed in the various sub-sessions on the topics of legislation, harmonization, and standardization. Please, Anne-Gaëlle, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Hans, and thank you for the introduction. So well said for my name. So what I'm going to give you is a brief overview of what was discussed in both the session on legislation and the session on industry and value chain initiative. So the first session was one which was actually shared by Juan Manuel, so he might be able to add into what I'm going to summarize, or attempt to summarize today. So in the session on legislation, we were given a very comprehensive overview of current legislative development on plastics, and there are many of them. We also the panel discussed the future needs for legislation. And then there was another session, which was on, as I mentioned, on the industry value chain initiative. That was the one on the product stewardship. So that session, basically, they were highlighting the importance of establishing clear goals. And we've seen that, for example, in the Circular Plastic Alliance, with the clear goal on 10 million tons recyclates. and also clear goals in the industry's Operation Clean Sweep on pellet loss. So again, that demonstrated well that these programs, initiatives can be very successful by setting clear goals and getting the whole value chain together, working together towards this goal. So what we retain from this session is really a word, which is actually the title of the first one. It's harmonization. Harmonization is key, and for many different reasons. So first, there's in the transposition of the European legislation, harmonization is important to preserve the single market. And there were discussions about, we have a number of directives. Is that the right legal instrument? Should we actually look at regulations rather than directives? So that's maybe a question for further discussion. We also looked at harmonization in terms of EU regulatory standards. So for example, looking at alignment of legislation such as REACH, the CLP, biocides, as well as food control materials legislation. And also in the interface with other legislations, for example, between the products legislation and waste legislation. And to add into that, all the standards are also extremely important to harmonize at EU level. These include the ones on separate waste collection, obviously to increase recycling and progress towards the circular economy. So in addition to the gaps, mentioned earlier by Kim, for example, on the no end of waste criteria for plastic, it was also noted that some concepts were still still needed to be clearly defined. So this includes the safe and sustainable by design. This includes also mass balance, but there are many others that also need to be clearly defined. And there are some unanswered questions. There's one in particular in relation to chemical recycling and climate neutrality. There's also the recycling processes for contact materials, which we heard about earlier about the issues with food contact materials recycling, and the definition of recyclability. And on that one, I think Juan Emmanuel is going to elaborate a bit more on the definition of what we need a definition for recyclability. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Gaël. I have your contribution. You say, okay, we have to set clear goals. Harmonization is the key. Do we have to do that at a national level, at European level, or at world scale level? What is the level playing field we have to create? Is it an option to do it as only in Europe, or do we have to set the standards worldwide?
Well, I think I would start by saying that first in Europe, we have European legislation. We need to ensure that it's implemented and transposed in a harmonized way. It may not be the session today for that, but there may be some issues with some of the new legislation. For example, in single-use plastic directive, we need to make sure it's really harmonized in terms of transposition.
Yeah.
To preserve the single market in particular. But also obviously, once we've done that at EU level, maybe we can take it globally. Mm. So it's maybe the next step. But I think first we look at Europe, and Europe being a single market, I think we need to focus on Europe rather than national legislation.
Yeah. And is there a time scale in Europe for to set clear goals to make harmonization clear? Do we have to? Is there an ambition to agree on that within before the end of this year or the next 10 years? What's the?
Well, I think it depends. Well, there are already some commitments and the circular economy action plans on the Green Deals, but I think that some of the goals could be shorter than others. For example, on the CPA, we have a clear goal for 2025. So for some others, it might take longer. So I don't think I can give you a date. But I think for some, yeah, it could be as soon as possible. But for others, it will take longer.
Okay, thank you very much for your introduction and contribution, Gaël. Juan Manuel, working for Amcor, a company developing and producing packaging worldwide. What's your point of view towards legislation, harmonization and standardization? And everybody is, of course, very interested in your answers to the question Anne-Gaëlle posted about the definition on recyclability.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think that's I pretty aligned with what my colleague Gaëlle, she mentioned. I think to the question of the harmonization, clearly harmonization comes from the legal base. So it's not like the private-led initiative from where the angle that we are talking. So I also think that it needs to be European beyond. I mean, the chances of having a global same approach is going to be very difficult because we don't have that approach from the legal base in any other politics. Yeah. And also I wanted to make the point on the timing. I think that by 2030, all the packaging needs to be recyclable, reusable at scale in Europe. That's the objective of the Commission and the Circular Economy Action Plan that Gaëlle mentioned before. So I think that latest by 2030, we need to have a solution in place. And linking to that is the definition of recyclability. And to me, the important is like for a technology institute like this ones, and where we are creating or trying, we are aiming at finding the full circularity of plastic, including recyclability. My questions or my provocation is like, what is the definition of recyclability that you are using in your research, your current research? Because as you may know, there is currently there is not a legal European definition of recyclability in place, or at least it's been this review under the Packaging Waste Directive, and that has a major consequence in what we can consider as recyclable or not recyclable, from understanding that it needs to be linked to the infrastructure of the waste management at the national level, or whether it needs to be understood from a regional perspective, from that European that Gaëlle mentioned before. So for me, one of the biggest challenge of the plastic storm is the fact that it has not come in a logical way, but it has come, as I said, in the formal storm where everything has been mixed, and where actually we have not started the house from the foundation. We have been discussing and advancing in technologies and in design for recycling guidelines for many years, while the definition of recyclability is going to be now being reviewed, let's say. So, and that can have a major consequence in the route of the new technologies of the future, of the new innovations of the future. So I think it's pretty important to make sure that we all participate in the current consultations and process opened by the Commission on defining what is the definition of recyclability and how do we want to measure that recyclability.
Okay, you both mentioned that's an important question. What's the definition of recyclability? And we are lucky that we've a poll, and we want to ask the audience. Okay, which aspect must be considered within the definition of recyclability? So we are going to use the wisdom of the crowd attending this session this afternoon. And I would like everybody to go to pollev.com and then Paco-Rutten 041 and then fill in words which for you are important and say something about the definition of recyclability. And then a word cloud will show up. And we will give the audience some time to contribute. So I see fossil replacing. Okay, now we see that there are two words or two aspects of recyclability, virgin and materials, and on the followed by replacing and products. When people are still filling in, Angael, I want to ask you if you see this word cloud. Do you think these are the good aspects of a definition of recyclability? Do you recognize it, or?
Well, we're still looking at it, but I would have liked to see standards in there, and I don't see that appearing, because obviously we need to define standards.
Yeah.
In order to support the definition.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you said standardization, you mean?
Yeah, by that I mean like the EU providing guidance on safe reuse and recycling based on standards, based on the best available technologies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you mean standard on product on product level or on material level, or what kind of standards do you think about?
Well, standard on what do you mean by reuse, for example? Like you need to define what reuse is, for example.
Yeah.
Reusing. You need to define the technologies which are the best available as well. So that's what I mean by standards. Yeah.
Okay. Juan, when you see this word cloud, what strikes you most?
Well, products clearly is interesting because to me it's also about harmonization in the infrastructure and in the approach, so the regional definition more than the national. And I think that if you have products designed to be recyclable, but the infrastructure is different in each country, it will simply not work. So we need to have a regional approach to that.
Okay. Thank you very much. When we started this session, I asked the people attending to post their question, and I think it's we have to pick one. And there's the last question, which was sent by Marco Teunissen. He said, from a consumer safety perspective, how can, if any, legislation ensure protection and risk mitigation to exposure to substances originating from recycled materials in consumer goods, for instance, automotive interiors? Juan, I see you're nodding, so you recognize this question.
Yeah, I mean, it's the typical question. I would say I'm not a technical in food content material, so I cannot provide. But what I can say is that is a typical question that has been going on, and probably what makes the difference between the mechanical and the chemical recycling, at least in the policy debate. So what has been solved to date, or the benefit of the chemical recycling, is that would overcome this challenge. At least in theory and according to the owners of this new technology or application of this technology in the packaging. So they would be able to solve this challenge. Now, we know that...
What's the challenge then?
Well, the challenge is like as it says there, in the mechanical recycling, you don't eliminate the contaminants in the same way that you would do it, or you could originally do it from the chemical recycling. Now, in the food content material legislation, already pyrolysis is accepted as a process for food content material. But it's not fully clear because it's a new approach, and I think they are also reviewing their legislation in order to have a more holistic view and holistic response of what is the chemical recycling within the food content material and how can that help in the in packaging for food and drink.
Yeah. Juan, if there was a clear definition of recyclability, what would that help Amcor in doing in their businesses?
Well, I mean, We are already doing quite a lot of things. I mean, actually, we are quite advanced on our way of design for recycling. We are moving our portfolio and trying to make it more sustainable by changing the polymers that we are using, let's put it this way, in order to comply with the CFLEX guidelines that our government is here as well, and to make it that design for recycling that we need to actually go in the direction, because we think that that is an intermediate step in the direction of the full recyclability. So I always say, for something to be truly recycled, you need 3 pillars. You need design, infrastructure, and consumer behavior. From the moment that one of those 3 pillars doesn't work, the recyclability doesn't work at all. A clear example is the PET bottle being named in the Single-Use Plastic Directive when it's fully recycled, you know, but we need to tackle also consumer behavior. We need to also put the light on blaming consumers that throw recyclable plastic on the street or on the environment, etc. Now, what we are doing is what is under our core responsibility, which is the design. But at the same time, we are aware and we are working with the rest of the supply chains to make sure that our design, or the design that has been agreed for the majority of the supply chains, also finds his infrastructure, and also it's coming jointly with the more responsible consumer behavior in order to have that full recyclability or full recycle process that we need.
Okay, thank you very much. I have to look at the time, and that's one of my tasks, is to take care that we end when it's necessary. Gaël, do you have a final remark on this issue? Otherwise, we continue with the developments in the value chain.
Well, I would just add that I agree with Juan Manuel that like we need to change consumer behavior, but I think that also, like as I mentioned standard before, and I come back on that, is that we don't have standard for EU separate collection. And I think maybe by making it easier, by developing these standards and implementing them, we will also improve like a consumer behavior.
Okay. After the break, we will have the discussion between the NGOs and some partners in the CPI program. And if there's time left, I will also put the question about the role of the consumer in this issue. For now, I want to thank Gaël and Juan Manuel very much for your contribution. And I would say stay posted for the rest of the conference. Okay, then we continue with the next subject, and that's about the development in the value chain. And we will do that with Graham Holder, and he's Managing Director of CFLEX. And for those who don't know CFLEX is the circular economy for flexible packaging. And that's a collaboration of organizations in the entire value chain, working to make all flexible packaging in Europe circular in 2025. I think that's a challenging goal. We will also have Gert-Jan Kramer. He's Professor of Sustainable Energy Supply Systems at the University of Utrecht. And I know Gert-Jan, he's posting all big questions. So we are looking forward to that. And Thor Tummers, he's working for public affairs at Unilever, and I think they are also quite involved in this topic. But first, I want to ask Graham to tell us what has been discussed in the very sub-session on the value chain subject. Graham, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hans, for the introduction. I think it's probably going to be simpler to answer the question as to what hasn't been discussed during the various sessions in this conference, because it's been a broad church. We've discussed lots of different aspects. We've heard the first 2 sessions today. That's a huge number of topics. For me to kind of like bring that together, because everything that we've been talking about is how we realize the circular economy for plastics. And for my project, CFLEX, we're trying to do it for flexible packaging in Europe. And we understand 4.5 years into this journey that there are basically 4 key elements that need to work together to do that. Today, they're kind of independent of each other. So we collect, sort, and recycle, and then try and sell it into the end markets. The packaging converters in the past have said, well, how do I, what do the products need, rather than can we design that to be recycled? And the end markets are saying, well, what's cheapest? Where do I buy this stuff and for the lowest cost? And quite often that's virgin. And EPR has been the glue that helps us meet the recycling targets in Europe. Stepping forward, hopefully by 2025, we see a much more joined up approach, a collaborative approach. In CFlex, we're very lucky to have over 180 companies participating from all parts of the value chain, flexible packaging value chain. And it's about understanding how these three balls in the EPR triangle work together and drive each other and what their needs are. And that we see EPR actually, I wouldn't say taking a step back, but they taking a much wider role to make sure that these things work with each other. And it all starts with the end markets, because those are the materials we're trying to get back from the economy to recycle so that they can re-enter into the market. So we need to understand those end markets in a lot of detail. What qualities do they need from their materials coming back from the recycler? In flexible packaging, 4.5 years in, we have a good idea, but it is by no means absolutely concrete and robust. Those numbers are exceptionally difficult to get to. Some of them can use mechanical recycled materials, some can't at the moment. Maybe they can in the future. So it's not clear, and it's moving with time. So once you understand what the end markets are, then you can look at what you need in terms of recycling capacity. How much mechanical recycling do you actually need? What is the size of the market? Does it include the commercial and industrial, or just the household consumer? That's changing as well, because all materials are going to be part of EPR by 2023, according to the European legislation. So once you understand in broad terms what recycling infrastructure you need, how much mechanical, how much chemical, and how much other, then you can put that in place. Then you can design the sorting. Well, how do we get the materials that those recyclers need to get to the different qualities? And then collection. Well, we've got to get it back from the market so that the sorters can sort it. But half of it's remaining in, for flexible packaging anyway, somewhere between 20 and 50%. In some countries, even 100% is remaining in the residual waste stream. So you can't go circular unless you're collecting it. So you do have to sort it out of hopefully separately collected streams, but we're probably also going to have to target the residual stream. So once you've got those things lined up and talking to each other and matched, then you can actually think about, well, am I designing my packaging materials to do this? And luckily, we don't have to wait for that. We've got design guidelines out there, and they exist for all sorts of plastics these days. And to come back to Anne Gale's points, the standards in the CPA are starting to emerge and be produced. But all of those things cost money. And we have this fantastic system called EPR in Europe. And that is what enables these materials to be collected, sorted, and recycled. Even glass, metals, and plastic and papers wouldn't be economically viable if there wasn't collection being paid for. So EPR has got a role to play in making sure that these recycled materials come back into the market at a price where they're competitive against virgin, so that the people wanting to use them say, I want to use that first because it costs me less and it has the right properties that for what I need. So that's why I'm saying that EPR is so important. And there's quite a number of changes that we've identified in CFlex that EPR are going to have to evolve towards to enable the circularity, not just for flexible packaging, but for all materials. We started with flexible packaging because it's probably one of the most challenging, but our learnings, we believe, are equally relevant to all materials, not only plastics. So Hans, it's a short summary of where I think we got to in the different sessions and trying to bring it back into what's needed for the circular economy.
Okay, thank you very much, Graham. I want to ask Gert-Jan and Thor also to switch on the camera. I will wait. There's Gert-Jan and there is Thor, probably. Yeah, hi Thor, also there. First, Thor, a question for you. When you hear the short introduction of Graham, do you agree that EPR will help the whole value chain to make it more circular? And my second question is, will this increase the costs for a company like Unilever? But first, the first question, do you agree with Graham?
Yeah, so thanks, Graham, for the comprehensive overview. On the question, I do fully agree that EPR plays a crucial role in creating a circular economy for flexibles. And also in the previous sessions, the importance of circular design or eco-design was mentioned. But in fact, if we do not sort out recyclable flexibles, eco-design isn't really that useful, of course. So to make sure that all these initiatives and all these investments by companies are also delivering in the end, we need to have this value chain overview, and that can really be owned by the EPR organization. Also in the further down the value chain, the processing step and the end markets, we believe that, that plastics really has a value, and also flexibles. So referring to your second point, it might be the case, and that is what is generally expected, that costs will increase in the coming years because so much still needs to be set up and developed and scaled up. But in the end, you can work to a lower fee in the end, as the material value will rise and the purity will improve and the demand will improve, so the end market will become much more mature. Even if you have this investment period for, let's say, 3 to 7 years, it's still worthwhile to do so to create a circular economy, both from a packaging material point of view and from an economical point of view. So indeed, costs will increase, but acceptable to make sure that we get there in the long term.
So EPR is fully supported by Unilever, as far as I understand. And how does it work in practice, the EPR? Does that mean that Unilever has the obligation? Because I know the Dutch system for washing machines, that we have the obligation. And how does that work for plastics for a company like Unilever?
Yeah, so when there's an EPR organization set up, there's a PRO, a product responsibility organization, which collects all the contributions from the individual companies so they can jointly make sure that the recycling targets are being met. So you financially contribute by paying a certain fee for the volume you put on the market. Mm-hmm. For that fee, the collection, sorting, recycling, and end markets will be organized by the EPR, by the PRO. Mm-hmm. But in fact, sometimes it's really challenging for them because it's not that they have all the, they do not all own the entire value chain. So they deal with municipalities, with other companies, plastic collectors, sorters, recycling companies, converters. So it's much more kind of an organizational role that the EPR fund is playing, and having contracts in place for several years. And what we need to do, and that's also what we are advocating for, we need to make sure that both the organizations that put flexible packaging on the market have an incentive to make sure that it is recyclable, but also the next steps also have an incentive to make sure that they properly sort the material, improve the quality, make sure that they try to find the best way, best place and way to process it using certain technologies, existing ones and developing new ones. And I think if we look back, there wasn't, this incentive was really lacking. So the incentive was to process as many kilograms as possible, which you will do by using rigids. And then the rest is less important. Now we want to make that shift and make sure that we both address these valuable material streams, but to also improve year on year. And you can do that financially, but also through legislation, and probably a combination is the most effective.
When is EPR to be expected to be implemented, Thor and Graham?
It's already implemented, but it's implemented to meet the targets. In fact, almost every country in Europe has an EPR system. The UK, while it's not part of the EU anymore, is busy putting one in place. They're funded to meet the legal recycling targets for the different materials. And so they only collect, sort, and recycle that quantity. If you want to go circular, you have to pay for everything, and that's going to cost slightly more. And that's where the unfortunate position that flexible packaging finds itself in. It was actually a lot easier to meet the targets with nice, big, heavy, rigid packs than with lightweight flexibles. And so consequently, the flexible funding, they've been paying EPR fees, was being used to meet the targets of other materials, because they could be.
Okay, thank you. Gert-Jan, hearing this all, what could be your reflection on the importance of EPR and the circular value chain?
Yeah, I see them as two different things. Perhaps I think extended product responsibility seems to be a great stride forward, obviously, right? I think it improves us from the situation that we're at to be in a better place 5 years from now. What I struggle to see, frankly, is that it will deliver sort of, or gets us on a smooth path to these lofty targets of a circular economy and 100% recyclability and a fully circular economy. And
question for Thor or for Graham, Gert-Jan?
Whoever wants to pick up on that.
Okay. If you have a fully funded EPR system designed as to collect and sort all materials, then they have the money to give the recyclers and the collectors the confidence to invest in the infrastructure, because they know there's going to be a market for that. The EPR system also has a responsibility to make sure that the materials that they're recycling can be returned to the market. And that means subsidizing these activities so that the recyclers can, when they put the recycling back on the market, it's at the right price and competitive against virgin. With today's low oil prices, quite often it's very difficult for recyclers to do that. Lately it's gone up, but that's only in the last couple of months. It's challenging, and it really is providing that investment security so that people can put the money in infrastructure, and the recyclers say, well, I'm confident I'm going to make a return on investment. I'm not going to go out of business.
In my introduction, I mentioned a report recently published that only 2% of the plastics is now, the new polymers is based on recycled polymers. Is EPR, to what percentage will EPR brings us, and on what time scale?
EPR is being implemented in almost every country in the world. I mean, it's probably in about 70 or 80 countries at the moment, but all of them, a lot more have plans to do it. And
only 2% of all the new plastics are based on recycled plastic. Then the question should be, is it effective, this instrument?
But it's got nothing to do with EPR. It's got to do with the recycling targets. The EPR meets the targets. You have to move the target from being 10%, 20%. In Europe today, it's still actually only 20%, 22% legally. In 2025, it becomes 50%. And that's probably higher than anywhere else in the world. So this is the issue, that we need to change our aspiration from meeting minimum targets at minimum cost to making these economies circular, so the materials can be returned to them.
Sorry?
Yeah, one addition to the rightful comment also from Gert-Jan is in the ambitions for 100% circularity, it's always challenging to do so. Even 100% food safety is a challenge, although we're quite developed there. But we do have to look at it a little bit broader. And with that, I mean, we look at for instance, also in the previous session, plastic food packaging to food packaging. But if you look at the material streams and the value they represent, developing mature markets for secondary raw materials could very well be that a percentage in a pyrolysis or gasification process which cannot be returned to plastics can becomes another chemical basic ingredient for a different market and a raw material for a different purpose. So it's like multiple chains that that in the end are much more or less circular to a very high degree, but it's not as it's not a closed loop per se. And I think in general we should strive for the highest quality and the highest possible value, but with the percentage that it is really challenging, you need to look at the second best option and the third best option, and with that you can really create a circular value chains that interact with each other, but it's not one single loop, and that will probably be what we are working towards.
Okay, thank you very much. Looking at the time, this is a very interesting topic. Again, looking at the time, we have to finalize. Gert-Jan, do you? I want to give you some time for some final remarks on this topics.
Yeah, thank you. And perhaps I'm the odd one out here because I'm not a specialist. I do in my daily work look at the big transitions, and the link to this was really the circular economy. And so then I still stick to my earlier point that I find it, and I think all of us find it difficult to see what the path is and what strides need to be made between 2% recycling and 100% recycling. And I have found in my work, and I've done some work in the DPI ISPT program to interview stakeholders, what actually motivates them to work towards circularity and what circularity means for them. And we found in that quite well, actually, that people are of two minds in that respect. There are, on the one hand, the people who are well represented and which is in line with this conversation, who say, you know, it's really about rethinking what materials do, how they can be recycled. So very much materials focused. On the other hand, there's also people, notably who are in the big manufacturing industry, say, well, you know, this is really about CO2 mitigation, and we heard that I think occasionally early on this afternoon, right? So CO2 avoidance is clearly a big driving force, and whether you approach it from the one perspective, the materials perspective, or the CO2/waste perspective, leads you, I think, practically and going from 2% to 100% in different directions. The materials view will tend you to drive you towards niches and perfecting the situation in niches. Upcycling then becomes really an important issue, and downcycling is seen as a loss. Whereas, and I heard you say that a bit towards the end, if you're more on the, well, it's all about CO2 and waste, then you say, well, just so long as we collect it and find somehow a way to reintroduce that in the economic industrial cycle, then we're fine. And then perhaps different metrics play around, right? Maybe upcycling is not much an issue. I heard you actually say that towards the end. Then maybe the thing is efficiency, right? Is all that counts, because if it's efficient, well, then I've seen to it that I'm ultimately resource efficient, and usually efficiency also means affordability.
Okay.
So yeah, I see this hanging over important, right? Precisely to chart the longer term path forward with this.
I think the CPI Grow program is lucky that you are one of the members, because you will continue posting these relevant big questions. And looking at the time, we have to, there's no time for a reaction by Graham or by Tor to Gert-Jan. I want to thank you for your contribution. And we will go, before we have a short break, we will continue with Ronald Korstagni. He is the Cluster Director of Circular Plastics Initiative. And what we heard today is there is a lot of issues connected to making the plastic circular. And Ronald, if you can switch on your camera, I think everybody is curious to hear in what way will all the issues be part of the CPI program, and what issues will not be part of the CPI program?
Yes, thank you, Hans. And also thank you all the panelists and also the contributing audience. What I have learned and heard today is that first of all, the leadership from the coalition of the willing is very essential. But in relation to the technical challenges, design for recycling will be very important. And therefore the focus in the development of plastics must be on fewer types of plastics and also monopolymer plastic applications. And to match functionality of the benchmark, new innovations are also needed. But also to become successful with design for recycling, this must always be done with an end market in mind and also applications in mind. So that is also what Graham very much stressed. And next to that, in design for recycling, it will also be important to minimize the use of recycling hampering compounds like additives, softeners, fillers, and halogens that were also addressed earlier. Prevention or efficient separation of these compounds is also very important. And eventually, sorting and characterization of plastic materials must become faster and more accurate. And there are a lot of initiatives there also at stake. The Holy Grail was mentioned in relation to that. But also to reach this new techniques and fast and combined data interpretation has also to be developed much further. So if I can go to the next slide. Also, given the complexity of plastics waste, and when aiming to make all plastic circular, chemical recycling will be necessary, and that needs to be developed further to optimize the output. And in order to make recycling technologies realistic, an agreement at the EU level is needed on the definition of recyclability, and also the harmonization of legislation has also has to be done at the EU level. Next to that, data collection and data as a whole, so in relation to qualities and quantities, also in the various steps of the plastic value chain, is important to guide current and new innovations, and also to generate reliable mass balances and also LCAs. And the development and influence of EPR systems, with which we ended also in the last discussion, will become crucial to drive improved collection, sorting, and recycling levels, and also infrastructure. As it was mentioned also by Graham, that this involvement of EPR also has to be into the infrastructure. And to implement tools like eco-modulation to encourage design for recycling. And for recycling of plastics, the mechanical route must be favored. That was something Tore also mentioned in the last session. But also, to get all plastics recycled, we have to implement also second and third options. If they are to be graded like that. And overall, collaboration is key to make things happen. So that's also where we stand for as CPI, to bring together the community, to try to organize new and good initiatives. And we also do this, and that's also what we are working on, at this moment in the development of our roadmap. So this is just a start of this roadmap. So we are working on this together with a company called Flatlands, which is a strategy designing company. And in relation to the outcomes of this conference, the CPI will give more emphasis on more technical developments. So design for recycling, sorting and characterization, chemical recycling and data collection will be taken up into our roadmap. And in relation to regulation and EPR systems, we will be following the developments and make relations as much as possible with our projects, in that way try to benefit the whole chain development as well. In relation to this roadmap, you will also be asked at the end of the conference, but also via email. Everybody who has been involved in this in all the sessions and has also been registered in the network app to give your input also on this roadmap. We hope to get in touch with you and stay in touch, of course, with you also in relation to this.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ronald, for this overview. And I want to stress the invitation to everybody to come with suggestions for subjects which should be implemented in the roadmap. Before we go into a short break, we will continue within 10 minutes from now. And after the break, we will have a discussion between some NGOs like the Plastic Soup Foundation, MVO the Netherlands and Zero Waste Europe, and we will ask them what's their opinion about this circular plastic initiative and circular plastic in the broad sense. So stay attuned, I would say, and we see each other at 5 minutes before 4 o'clock, so that's exactly 8 minutes from now. Okay, hopefully welcome back everybody for the last part of the program. That's a discussion between some representatives from NGOs and 3 members of the Circular Plastic Initiative program. And we have from the NGO side, we have Yannick Vak, and he is the program coordinator of Zero Waste Europe. And Zero Waste Europe, they are a leading fast-growing movement in Europe working towards the vision eliminating waste in our society. So not only eliminating plastic waste, but it's more general. Then we have Mark Pruin, he's working for the MVO Netherlands, and that's a movement for entrepreneurs in the new economy in the Netherlands. And before that, he was working for the Ministry of Infrastructure, and he's one of the specialists in circular economy. And we have Harmen Speck, and Harmen Speck, he's the Manager Innovation and Solutions for the Plastic Soup Foundation. And the Plastic Soup Foundation, that's a single-issue environmental organization aiming to stop plastic pollution at its source. And they are going to talk with John Vernooy, and John, he's General Director of Omrin, and Omrin is a waste collector and processing committed to circularity. Then we have Jandeep Das, I do hope that I pronounce it so well, and he's the Global Packaging Director of Unilever. And last but not least, Jaap den Doelder, and he's working for the Dow company, and he's also part-time professor at the Technical University in Eindhoven. And I wanted to ask all these people to switch on their cameras and join the final part of the program. And I want to wait until John, Sanjeev, and Jaap are also on stage. But probably they are a little bit hesitant in order to talk with the NGOs. Could that be a reason? I do hope not, but we will see.
No, I started my video, Hans, but I'm not showing up, so I'm not hesitant at all to talk.
Okay. That's very good. That's very good.
And same here.
Okay, very good.
And here.
Okay, then we can stop with the sheet, and then we see everybody. Okay. Very good. Oh yeah. Now I see it's that everybody is joining. Okay. First, I want to go to give the floor to the NGOs in order to give their reflection of what they heard in the program before the pause. And of course, we are very much interested in their opinion on the initiative the ISPT and DPI is taking, and do that give them confidence that this is the road to the solution, whatever it may be. Okay, Yannick, first from the European perspective, I want to give the floor to you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I must say that I have not been. I must apologize. I have not been following the whole conference from the start. I did join about I think the last hour session, which was on the lessons learned. I must say that I agreed partly to the conclusions. I think what is really missing from the discussions is the priority actually to reduce the plastic use. There is no way we can handle all the plastics that we are producing and consuming. We simply will not have enough capacity. It's far out pacing our infrastructure, even the current one or even the future one. So I think it's the focus needs to become more on using really plastics where it makes sense. I would say so. So I think I would maybe comment the specific elements later. I don't know how you prefer.
Okay, that's a very clear statement, Yannick. Thank you very much. Harmen, do you agree with this statement, or do you have another statement you would put on the table? Please unmute, Harmen.
Good one. No, I merely agree with the statement of Yannick. What I miss in the whole story is, of course, the leakage risks of plastics. And that was typical. The former speaker, Gert-Jan, spoke about circular economy and climate change. But plastic soup issues are not incorporated in this. And that's a little bit of a pity. And it's also the strange mindset where we're working with. We try to figure out how to deal with the vast amounts of this material, but the environmental impact of plastic is really into the leakage risks and into the waste problems, especially in developing countries. So is it a challenge or even, yeah, can we come up with a good system to collect this waste and recycle it, to even copy this blueprint to these countries? I think that's the biggest challenge, and I think that will be the biggest hurdle as well.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a very, very clear additional statement. Harmen, do you have figures? What percentage of all the plastic or the single-use plastic is leaking into the environment?
Yeah, that's difficult because there are multiple numbers about that, but the latest figures we use is that 32% of the global production of plastic is leaking to the environment, and that's inclusive uncontrolled waste dumping and uncontrolled burning of plastic waste. So that's a big amount of plastic volume worldwide. Yeah.
And when I come back to the remark Turmers from Unilever made, he said plastic is a valuable material. So throwing the leakage to the environment, that's a waste of material. Marek, what is there a statement you would contribute, or a reaction you would contribute, add to the others?
Sure, I would, Hans. Thank you for asking me and letting me join this conference. The info in the former part was very interesting, and for me, I heard a lot of new things. As a process engineer, I understand discussions on definitions and recycled content, and especially EPR targets. It's very clear they are not yet fully circular. As a concerned citizen and also representing sustainable business companies, I say that also incineration and leakage of plastic should be abolished as soon as possible. That's avoidance of CO2 and waste Gert-Jan talked about. And sure, circular EPR schedules, there were talked about regulations, EU regulations, harmonizations. They are very important instruments. Beware of a waiting game. Time is not on our side when we're looking at the plastics problem, and setting up an adequate EPR schedules, meeting circularity in Europe or in the whole world, it's a huge task, and it will take ages before we are so far. So we have to speed up, and speeding up, I think the key word there is the end market. And that's an interesting word, the end market, especially coming from brand owners, because the end market for recyclates is also the primary market for brand owners. Other words for end market in this case is society, because that's where the products go to, and that's where the recyclates eventually should go to. And I think then the greatest barriers there are, of course, technology development, which a lot of process engineers are available here. And as a process engineer, very happy to hear that. But the other one is the market pool. We need to organize the market pool in order to get the chain going. And how can you arrange that? Well, in the old days, maybe you remember we had the term best available technology. I think we should use, whenever you can make a product with an amount of recyclate or sustainable material, you should make a product with that material and not the other way around. And you can help that with taxes, with eco-modulation. You can help it with, I think the best thing is legislation. the EU is thinking and working on an obligation on recycled content. And when you have that recycled content, especially like PAT, we all have already now, when you have an amount of recycled content, then it's really pooling all the other barriers with it, except for leakage. Leakage still is a problem. Mm-hmm. So what I will say is, yes, of course we need EPR, of course we need this legislation, but we have to start with the market pool and organizing that. And then you need not to wait for a European approach, because that's a waiting game. And I think our country, Holland, the Netherlands, is a very good, appropriate country as a field lab to have all the ingredients, to have the market pool, organize the market pool that's already there, speed it up. The government is willing, the people are willing, we have the technology, and use it, and from that we can spread it out through Europe and the rest of the world. So that's my statement, and of course I'm very in for discussion.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Mark, Harmen, and Yannick. Mark, to continue a little bit, or to elaborate, to investigate a little bit, your favorite option is to organize the market pool. So you would say, okay, let's do it in the Netherlands because we have the infrastructure to be a field lab, and then legislation is the key word.
Well, also you can use taxes or other pricing, or you can even price primary material because it's CO2 emitting. But you have to take care that there is always a market for the recycled material, especially in the products you put on the market. Yeah. So that's and legislation, of course, is very easy. We did it in the Netherlands, I think, 5 years ago for the bottles, and increasing the amount of recycled content. Okay. That created a market. So there's no more discussion on PAT, which to get it into to keep it into the cycle.
Yeah. Okay. When I listen very well to you, then we have different options, different topics. I would say reduce the amount of plastic. How to stop the leakage, and organize the market pool. And Mark, you said we don't have a lot of time to organize it in a proper way. Let's pick the first one. Reduce the amount of plastics we use. Jaap, working for the Dow Company and being a professor at the Technical University in Eindhoven, do you see options to reduce the amount of plastics we use?
Yes, absolutely. I think all the comments made by Yannick, Harmen, and Mark are spot on. And I think one of the reasons that they were not totally focused on in the first session is, of course, they are more holistically around it, so to speak, right? And so you may get the impression that we want as much plastic as possible so we can do all these nice circularity stuff. No, clearly reduction is at the forefront. And yeah, I think, you know, in material science companies like Dow and in academia and in other parts of the chain, this has actually for decades been the main thrust, down gauging, reduction. The thing is, of course, one of the fascinating things is that the technological solutions to that have become more complex, right? Multi-layer, multi-material, all these things. We currently have, let's say, a 50 micron thick flexible package, where in the past you had a 1 millimeter thick a bottle, reducing the weight a lot. So that really goes in that direction, but that may not necessarily go into the direction of circularity and recyclability. So that's one thing I wanted to say there, but it's still super important. So of course, we're looking at, let's say, better polyolefin materials as an example, where you can do both, where you can make it a mono material, helped with the definition of recyclability that you were hearing about, and where you can still down gauge and make it thinner. So that would be the best of both worlds. But I also want to recognize that probably, since the drivers have not been to the forefront as they should be, there's also a lot of opportunity to substitute plastic by other materials, right? It's not like you should use plastics for everything. But then you have to also, again, be holistically looking at it. So you could either use no packaging, but you have to think through the consequences, right? If I take the example of certain food packages like meat, you know, a lot of the CO2 and the energy goes into the logistics of that, keeping it fresh, all these things. So if you were to reduce some of the barrier properties there, you have to think through all the consequences. So I think there are a few buckets. I think there's a bucket where you can just, you know, do without the plastic. Do you then want to replace it with an alternative packaging material? Think that through very carefully as well, from all the LCA components that you want to look at. There will also be something where you can redesign it and go with less. And you know, there will be the very complex ones like medical waste that we've seen in the COVID situation. So, but even there, you know, we're looking at things to recycle the plastics used there. So probably a too long answer for you, Hans, but it's very nuanced. And I think my main recognition to the NGO representatives is that they raise a fair point that you need to look a little bit in a wider circle around what was the focus of the CPI. But of course, the focus of the CPI has this also in the background, but yeah, it needs to have a certain focus, recognizing that.
But yeah, if the figures are right from the report I mentioned when we start, that the production capacity of single-use for single-use plastic will increase by 30% the next 5 years, might increase by 30%. That's the opposite of what Yannick is asking for, reduce the plastic use.
Yes, but of course it has many facets to it, because it's a lot in different parts of the world where people are advancing to similar standards of life that we are. And you may question those standards of life, and maybe we need to take a step back, right? But we also want them to flourish and grow, but you have the chance to do it right there. So the amount of plastics is just one angle to the discussion there, and it's an important one. But you have to think through of all the consequences. Suppose you would, you know, provide the water in a developing country in an alternative way than in a flexible, you know, pouch or whatever. And what are the consequences of that? It may be a terrible CO2 story, who knows, right? Or you have other aspects of not being circular. So yes, it's a fair point, but it has to, and I don't like the absolute statements, right? And that, or the one solution fits all. I think it's more subtle.
Yannick, is the reaction of Jaap, is gives that a comfortable feeling for you that we are going in the right direction?
Well, yeah, I think it's good to hear that there are some considerations, but I actually think there's a lot of uses that are currently unnecessary.
Like
lots of single-use packaging for very short lifetime that can be reused by refillables, for example. It's mainly about packaging, right? And we have we can have, for example, quotas for beverage packaging to have refill targets, and this is already happening in many countries. We can just scale it up. We can also improve transport packaging, and there's a lot of benefits of, for example, reusable transport packaging over one-time packaging, and there are many uses that are already existing that can be promoted more by setting specific targets for the reduction in plastics and particularly for the single-use plastics.
Okay, Sanjeev, you are the global packaging director of Unilever, and hearing this conversation, what is your opinion about this topic, the reduction of plastics we use?
So I think I'm sort of in two minds, because I'm also with Yannick and also with Jaap, because he also made a valid point. I think there's no utopian solution. There's no one magic bullet to this complex system that we have. Yes, we are reducing plastic, and definitely wherever we can eliminate plastic by consciously designing it right, we need to. And I'm quite sure, as Jaap alluded to, we started, say 2 decades ago with film thicknesses that are 1 millimeter, and over a period of time, due to the evolution of technology and also ship and distribute products, we have been able to reduce considerable plastics and knock it off. Yeah. But then, of course, there is also a certain limitation. The second thing is the economics behind it. I think in some markets, and I know I'm not talking only just because, only from a European context, but we look at big markets other than Europe, where trying to get products at a certain price point is so important for consumers to enjoy a certain product, because they also deserve to kind of have a lifestyle like the rest of the world. And that's why packaging does play a bigger role there, and we have to bring that down. The third point, I think, one of the reasons also is that 4 decades or 5 decades since plastic has become a very constant part of our lives, consumer behavior or consumer habit change is very important also to kind of get rid of certain areas of unnecessary plastic. Yes, great. You like to have a refill pack, great. How do you motivate consumers that they want to have a drink and they run to the nearest filling station and fill it? It's a very, very cumbersome model. So we'll have to kind of look at it. What are the different solutions around this problem? From our perspective, yes, reducing plastic is extremely important, and that's one of the reasons why within at least Unilever, we have looked at wherever we can eliminate plastic, we are doing it very consciously. We have a target, and we're driving towards the target of reducing plastic.
Mm-hmm. What's the target of Unilever?
We basically said that we would reduce half the quantity of virgin plastics that we use. Yeah.
And is that in absolute terms?
In absolute terms, I think it almost is almost closer to what 350, 400,000 tons of plastic, which we're going to make it in terms of reducing it by half that from a virgin plastic perspective. We also have a target of reducing 100,000 plus tons of plastic for the products we use. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so the conscious looking at it is definitely an aspect. But I do believe that many solutions need to go hand in hand towards this problem. There could not be one solution that fits all.
Do you agree with Mark that we have a little time to solve this problem? So we have to speed up.
Indeed, and I think, and that's perhaps one of the, yes, that there is a pressure of time. And that's why I think many industries, and I'm talking from a user industry perspective, not only from my company, are picking up very ambitious targets to sort of look at this problem. I think we all believe that plastic is an integral part of our daily lives. It's, one is just the packaging part, but look at beyond packaging. Yeah, and the amount of plastics that we use is also considerably high. The key thing is how do you then ensure that it stays out of the environment? Yeah, and I think that's also one aspect that we have to look at it. The other aspect which I mentioned is, and sort of to keep it out of the environment, what are the steps that we need to put in place? Mm-hmm. At an industry level, at the whole value chain level, at the legislation level, so that we can keep plastic out of the environment to the extent possible. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Circular economy plays a role.
Yeah.
And I actually also like what Graham said, that so long as you can bring a value to the waste and treat waste as a resource, you can then drive the whole economic behind it. But parallelly, we will have to also look at steps of engaging and involving consumers in this journey as well. Mm-hmm. We have, got used to a lifestyle, and suddenly we want to then change that lifestyle. Yeah, which basically also means a huge consumer behavior change has to come through. Yeah. And will it happen in a very short period of time? We don't think so. It will take some time to step in. And, many pilots are being run in different industries around the world. And over a period of time, we do think that could be a way that some will work, some will not work. And that's the way of how experiments are and projects are. And once that are going to work, we will then upscale them so that in some aspects, we can also start reducing plastic, as Yannick mentioned.
Okay, thank you very much. John, you are collecting all the after the usage of the material and trying to do good things with all the plastics. What's your opinion about this this topic? Are we going fast enough towards the solution, or should we do something else?
Well, I think fast enough, that isn't the right terms here. What Harman was saying, I think he was hitting the nail on the head when he says we need a good collection system. There's so much leakage, and if there's not a good collection system in place, we'll never collect the plastics being brought at the market. And the second thing is, if I was watching this conference, with the purpose of 100% recycling of plastics or the circular solution. You see many insights being shared in this podium. I think that CPI has a very nice network to do that. What Ronald was saying, that collaboration is key. That's also what my opinion is. It is collaboration, and then over the chains, you should build chains. Mark is saying we need a much stronger market pool. I think that's one of the aspects, but I think if I compare it to, for example, the energy transition, everybody wanted also clean energy, but it really started flying when the government set the goals on carbon reduction, and there was created a business model by subsidizing. In Germany, they had the Einspeisegesetz. In Holland, they had the SDA. So if there is a business model, I think that things start happening. So the government should set the recycling targets for plastics, and they should focus on percentages of granulate of recycled content. Mm-hmm. If that's happening, then there should be a level playing field. And therefore also the EPRs, they play an important role in that. And if that happens, then there comes a security on investment, and then we can create an innovation agenda. This innovation agenda isn't solved very easy. It's long term to find the ideal solutions, and if you want to do that, you need to build the chains. Also, when I was listening to the harmonization work group, I'm very in favor that the amount of sorts of plastics are being harmonized, and somebody should do that in order just to build the chains. And then in the collaboration, it is collecting first and then sorting, and it is recycling. If you talk about, Harman says about the leakages in the collecting, we talk about also the leakages in the sorting and the leakages in the recycling. And if you see then what the amount of yield is really being recycled, then I sometimes get tears in my eyes. And I said, and then to answer your question, is it going fast enough? No, it's not going fast enough. Mm-hmm. We should move.
And John, which party is in the lead? Is this the government who should take actions and play a level playing field and set legislation in the Netherlands, in Europe? Who is bringing us the solution for this huge problem?
Yeah, I think that the government should make sure that there's a level playing field. So they should set targets on recycled plastics. I think it starts in Europe, and then it's being brought down also to the national governments. What always surprises me, if I talk to the brand owners or the industry, it's always about money. It's always about cost. But if I compare the cost of packaging material to a product price, it's only a very small part. And in the end, it's always the consumer paying for the system. It's either the government levies they're being charged with, or it's the producers' fees being paid in the supermarkets, but they pay for the recycling or the getting rid of all the raw materials. So what we should do is that we should create a very good system where we can focus on recycling. And the first is the government by setting the targets, etc. And then it's the EPR systems, but they manage the money involved, and they create actually the business cases. On the one hand side, charging from the brand owners, and on the other side, paying the money to the recyclers and the collectors just to make sure. But if there is not a target what they should what they should meet, they are not moving fast enough. The government should take charge there.
So the government has to play a major role. Mark, it will not be surprised that I ask you, why is the government not taking quicker steps in the direction?
I'm not surprised you're asking me that, but of course I was leased from the government to a public company now, to a public organization now, so I'm not representing the government.
Yep.
Although I might maybe in the future.
You can speak free.
I can speak free, but also with a warm heart. These are political choices at the end. And in our country, we had government consisting of parties who are not in favor of this too much. And I hope, because we are now in the formation of a new government, we will have one that favors this more than the old one.
Okay.
And I'm fully aware that the reason why government is not in favor of that also has to do with what we call the assets. We are used to the way we are working now. We have money invested in the system that's there. We have habits invested there, and changing that requires a lot of courage, leadership, and also uncertainty. And that's someone I think the Dutch people are up to. And I hope the next government will be up to also. Having said that I think the Dutch government is one of the leading governments in the world when it comes to the plastic chain, although there's a lot to improve.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a poll questions, and I'm looking at Paco because we have a statement, and I want to ask the audience what is their opinion about the statement. And the statement is European and not national legislation is essential to achieve circular plastics. Paco, can you start the poll, because I want to know what's the opinion of the audience, and we will please go to pollev.com. Completely agree. It's working. At least one person has found the poll, so that's encouraging. And when everybody is filling in the poll, Harman, do you agree that the government is in the driver's seat?
Yeah, I agree that the European legislation is way more important than the national legislation. And that's also coming back in discussions, especially in the discussion about chemical recycling. There's already focus on a way broader scheme than only the Netherlands. And yeah, that's also the risk of a lock-in effect, of course. They think they already need a lot of waste out of the rest of Europe to make it feasible. Is that bad? Yeah, I don't know. On the other hand, it's really good to innovate and to get real good levels of recycling and especially quality driven. On the other hand, that lock-in effect, I think that's risky. I would rather say, well, create a good environment, create good innovations, and try to copy paste that to other countries that they can get around with their own waste. I think that's way more valuable than transporting all the waste to our country. That's the biggest risk now, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Yannick, you are working at the European level on legislation, but you see the audience says, okay, a little bit more than 90%, okay, European legislation is essential. Is that, do you agree, Yannick? And are we achieving that on the short term?
Absolutely. I think particularly European legislation has an important role to play, complemented, of course, by national legislation. I think we need to have a binding targets. And working only on a voluntary basis, it doesn't seem to work. So we need to have a target for recycling, but we also need to have most important, we need to have a targets for reuse and waste reduction, because at the moment, I'm maybe going into now recommending, but yes, as I said, it seems to work best at the European level. So we have harmonized rules for all the member states. Yeah. And I think there's a lot we can still do, because current focus is just very much focused on recycling, and that's not good enough. Mm-hmm. It's simply not good enough. So we need to focus more upstream, and that's where we are missing. And I think that's where the European Commission currently is working and focusing on with the next circular economy package. So I think there's a lot we can still do.
And do you have confidence that the legislation the European Committee is working on is bringing us the solution, or is it not strong enough or not effective enough? What's your opinion?
Well, yes. Well, I mean, I would say that I think the direction is there. It maybe needs some guidance in terms of also ambition. And I think here, what we unfortunately often see is that the member states are often more conservative than the Commission. And I think there it would be important to have support from also from the industry in ensuring that the right policies are put in place to drive circularity. Mm-hmm. I think there are a lot of drivers that at the moment are very much focused on limiting landfilling, for example, or recycling. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to move away from it. We need to have a targets for residual waste. We need to also have targets for reuse.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to Sanjeev or to Jaap. Do your company, as far as you know, support the European legislation in this field?
And maybe I can start, since you asked both of us. Yeah, I mean, it's clear that that it's moving in the right direction, and you can always debate about certain mechanisms which are the most effective and the most stimulating and useful. Only voluntary stuff is not going to work. You've seen a lot of pledges from companies like ours that I think are voluntary, but also honestly coupled to the legislation, right? So I think these things go hand in hand. I would like to add that basically all of this is kind of, you know, as me, I'm kind of a scientist. I think it's stimulating innovation, right? And I think that's really what motivates me in this. And you know, if you only talk in legal terms, yes, these things are necessary to create harmonization and boundaries and frameworks. But you know, why were we motivated to go for down gauging? It was a clear trend, and it stimulated material science and new strong, better molecular weight distributions, if I talk a bit technically here. And it will be the same with this new playing field, right? So, but it has to be a level one. And I think I would say that it's European level is a nice level. But I also agree with, I don't know who said it, but you can do stuff nationally, but then you have to be faster or more advanced, not dragging it down, right? So I think in the Netherlands, like with this initiative that we now have between DPI and ISPT, we'd want to definitely go faster, right? And do we then only want to tap into European money? No, probably not. You want to do something locally, convince the local government, you know, growth funds, these type of things, set up more nimble demonstration things. I think we just need to demonstrate more, do more, and then it will go much faster. So that's more the national aspect. But of course, if I think of how we operate economically, it's not even European, it's global for companies like ours, and probably for Sanjeev the same way. So maybe Sanjeev can add something to this.
Yeah, Sanjeev?
No, I think I'm sort of, I probably will end up repeating what Jaap mentioned.
Okay.
I think there is a need.
Let's not do that.
But as I think we need to also decouple this thing. You know, if there are national initiatives that want to go faster than the harmonization, that's perfectly fine. But you know, as we all actually are living in a world that is very connected, and particularly if you look at European Union, it's much more connected. Most companies have very connected supply chains, and the whole value chain is connected. So therefore, having a level playing field is very important. And on top of it, if certain governments would like to drive it faster, we of course welcome it.
The idea Mark mentioned that let's make the Netherlands a living lab for the circular plastic. Is that from your international perspective? You're a global player, or Unilever is a global player. Is that an option, or would that be a disadvantage for your business?
I think if there is area or a country which can take a certain, I would say pioneering step in some of this area and in some of this circular economy technologies. And if this technologies also can be then brought to the different parts of the world, then it's a welcoming step. Yeah. I think, let's look at even say, for example, we talked a lot about chemical recycling. Yeah. From our context, mechanical recycling still has certain limitations. Yeah. And when you look at, for example, in application in food packaging, where you need to kind of make sure that the food safety aspects are taken care of, chemical recycling will play a role. Now, the technology is still it's not mature, it's still its infancy, it's going to evolve. And I'm quite sure that there will be countries, perhaps in the Netherlands, which can start playing a role in that. And then how do we sort of then make sure that technologies are also then scaled up for the rest of the world? And then we would definitely welcome that.
Mm-hmm. I would like to add maybe, Hans, that the Netherlands has an edge on certain other countries in Europe because of its current infrastructure in plastics. Like if you look at the pyrolysis, okay, those can be a certain size units, but at some point it has to come together in a bigger unit. Let's call it a cracker, for instance. You're not going to build a new cracker easily, right? So where are they at the moment? They're dominantly in the Netherlands and in some other countries. So you want to tap into that. If that's your cycle, if that's the cycle going through the advanced recycling via pyrolysis, that's what you want to do. Well, mechanical has a little bit different footprint, more smaller, maybe in the 10 to 30 kiloton type, not the hundreds of kilotons. So there it's a little bit different. But it's a matter of moving the waste, like Harmen was saying, you have to think that through very carefully. Yeah. I was always of the opinion, let's do it very locally. Then I looked at some of the numbers, and then actually the climate burden or the CO2 burden of moving it around was actually far more limited than I had anticipated. So you need to quantify these things, right? And then do the equations and see what makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I add something to that? Yeah. I think a focus on recycling is good, but I want to make clear, and that adds on to what Yannick is saying, we really should focus on reduction of plastic wherever possible. Not only about the big amounts, but also about the risk of leakages in every sort of way. It's not only about microplastics, but also about wear and tear of plastic materials or plastic products. And even if you look at production and recycling processes and transport processes, there's a lot going wrong. We find pellets or noodles everywhere in the environment, and even recyclates from the recycling sector, we find them everywhere. And so we need to focus on the processes and normations for that as well. Good standards are crucial for making a real circular system.
Harmen, do you have a specific question in line with your with what you said just to Jaap or to Sanjeev?
Yeah, well, I'm curious, especially maybe to Jaap. How do you see if you're going to eventually you want a lot of plastic to be converted into new, quite a good material, but on what level do you want to achieve that? Is that locally on a huge scale? And what do you think the impact of that is? Do you need a lot of plastic out of other member states, or do you have a sort of vision on that?
Yeah, we are kind of organized in 4 big geographies globally, so to speak, and we don't want to go, let's say, ship stuff to Asia and back from Asia and those type of, let's say, wrong, you know, incentives or whatever that could help that you don't want that. Let's then look, let's say, within Europe. Yes, the level playing field. I'm going to repeat all these things, but then. Yeah, I think the example are basically like, okay, very practically. So we have crackers in Terneuzen, we have crackers in Germany, we have crackers in Spain, and that covers the whole of Europe. And there's also some import-export of the virgin plastic that you make there, right? So it has to be on that type of level if you go through that advanced recycling route, which is absolutely necessary for part, probably significant part of the circular plastics for the quality and the applications, the end market you want to go into. So there it's really, I would say there's then a couple of, for our company, a couple of places in Europe where that come in as an option. For the mechanical recycling, it's a much more open game, I would say, at the moment. I think the answers are not there yet. I think it should be much more flexible in a number of options, not just one size fits all there. And with size, I don't just mean the kilotons, but also the type. You know, and it also depends on the streams that you can get. So again, the design for recycling, which is actually our most important effort, I think, at the moment, is super essential, and the separate collection and these type of things, because it's a real pity that stuff gets, you know, quality issues where they can be avoided. Also on your point of the leakage, of course, that's a point very well taken. There's also this Operation Clean Sweep that you are aware of that I think has been a very good driver. Because you want to practice what you preach. You don't want on your production site to have the pallets or the nurdles, as you say, lying around everywhere or falling off a truck when you fill it. So these type of things are absolutely essential. So yeah, it's a combination of all of that. But I think we are a big fan of not using plastic when it's not needed, and of seeing plastic as a super valuable material. But also the consumer aspect. I think there's the consumers that just don't care and whatever. But I think the majority wants to do the right thing, but they don't know how. You know, I honestly, in my own kitchen, if I see a package, and I'm a polymer guy, you know, I honestly can't tell what is this. Is it multi-layer? Is this, where should I throw it, right? And then my municipality is different from the next municipality. So on those aspects, I think a lot of progress needs to be made as well.
I want we are approaching the end of this subsection also, but. During this afternoon, the role of the consumer was mentioned several times. What's the role of the consumer in solving this issue? Yannick.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Important, is it?
Well, I mean, it's
doesn't it have a role at all? What do you think?
Well, they have definitely a role to play, but do not blame the consumers for things that are out there if they don't have an option. For example, I was listening for a webinar actually on Wuppertal Institute, which mentioned that waste prevention has about 90% more profitability than recycling and a lot of savings, but we don't really see options. I mean, here in Belgium, I really see a lot of options. You can go to packaging-free shops. They are popping up now on every quarter, and they're now not only they are in every quarter, but you almost have like an option between them. So I mean, yes, they if the options are there, then they can do the right thing. So we have to make it easy for them to do the right thing. But we cannot say that, you know, it's their responsibility. I think maybe
bring the right options to the consumer.
Yeah, exactly. And like there have to be incentives. For example, when we discuss about EPR or DRS, I think a DRS is an excellent tool for motivating citizens actually do the right thing, and it should be really scaled up. And I think this is what is already happening.
Okay, Harman, what's the role of the consumer in your opinion, in relation to the role of the producer?
I think the role of the consumer is quite limited, and I agree with Yannick. The options for a consumer are also limited. Most of the products we buy are from plastic or packed in plastic, and you really should make a lot of effort to reduce your amount of plastic that you buy in every day or use in your kitchen. It's a hassle. It's really hard to do that. So there should be more options for that, I guess. And I think the subdirective is also focusing on reusability of products and reusable containers, etc. I think that's a good thing. It will be hard for a lot of consumers to adopt that, but eventually, with a lot of time, it will happen, I guess. But it's the only way to really reduce, especially the packaging material, and that's represents almost 50% of the plastic soup even. So that is the biggest problem in the environment eventually.
Okay, thank you. We are approaching, as I said, the end of this session. I want to ask to Mark, Harmen, and Yannick, what can be your main message to the partners in the CPI program to focus on? If you have an advice, okay, please pay attention to this or this or this. I say anything.
I'm curious about actually, you know, as I mentioned in the studies, which show huge material savings and also profitabilities from strategies that focus on waste reduction, sort of reuse methods, innovative business models. But but that's not the focus often in those discussions. We always focus on recycling. And I don't think we can't really recycle our way out of this.
So more focus on reducing the amount of plastics we use.
Reuse. I mean, not only you know. Of course, we have to limit the kind of things that we don't want to have, but I think reuse has a huge potential.
Okay, Mark, what would be your main advice?
Well, not surprising. Hurry.
Quick.
Don't rely on Europe because it takes too much time. It takes all the member states are having their own affairs and are waiting. Don't rely on the consumer, but hurry on developing technologies and making it work in practice by organizing the market pool. And maybe in response to what Sean Vernooy replied to my comment, a market pool can also become from legislation, a compulsorily recycled content amount. That's a market pool also. And those are the things that are really necessary and are also in favor for chemical industry, especially in Europe.
Okay, thank you. Harmen?
I think it's also about the trust, gaining the trust of the consumer. And I think that's already a big problem because a lot of consumers sometimes think it will be coming quite right with the circular economy, but the circular economy, it feels like it's already happening, and that there is a lot of value in the material. But I think a lot of consumers already know that that's not the case, especially around plastics. So recycling, it's a necessity. We can't get around that, unfortunately, I would almost say. But if we do it, make it transparent and worthwhile, and let's see what is possible, what is not possible, and make it transparent and honest, and tell the story about it. That it's a journey to make, and that we're actually still on the beginning. I think that's a good message to consumers, and try to gain their trust to make it more sustainable eventually.
I'm curious. What is John, Sandeep, and Jaap? What are you taking with you from this last session? And please keep it short because otherwise we won't finish on time. Just 1 or 2 sentences. John.
I think I would stress just use the network just here available and make it sure together and make ourselves proud that we achieve building a new system. And then hurry, Mark.
Okay, thank you. Sanjeev?
I think indeed what I'm taking is definitely a systemic change that is needed to drive this. And I do agree with Mark that speed is of the essence.
Okay, thank you. Jaap, final famous words.
Thanks for that. I think what I really learned from Harmen, Yannick, and Mark is basically that we really need to think of what is the scope of our effort. Let's make it very focused, because we are technology driven, and coming from that angle, we already have in many of the projects that we have in mind the social and the economic and the legislative aspect. But you heard from Ronald also that he said, okay, we're focusing on the technology. I think listening to everybody, it's clear that we can use the momentum of that network and that technology to also influence the other aspects, take it one level broader than that. So that's my learning from the discussion today.
Okay, thank you, Jaap. And my wish is that I think at the end we are all aiming at the same goal. And my wish is that NGOs and industries are working more close together in communicating and collaborating in achieving the same goal, because that's of importance for all of us. Okay, thank you very much for your contribution, and I enjoyed listening to you. And now we switch to the final part of the program, and that's what we are going to do. Where's Ernst Jan? Yes, there's Ernst Jan van Klingen. He's managing director of the Dutch Polymer Institute. And Ernst Jan, I want to ask you to switch on your camera. And what are because you, of course, as one of the organizers of this program, for you are the famous last words to finalize this session. Ernst Jan.
Yes, thank you.
Your camera on.
Yeah, does it work now? Do you hear me?
Yeah, we see you.
See me? Good. Well, thank you all for this very inspiring session. I think at the end it was also very clear that indeed scoping is important, and that collaboration, the word we've used many times during these conferences, is increasing in importance, as that is really what can help us to gain speed. Yeah, when I look back at the conference and really take it back to the very first session, we issued some expectations. We said this is a consortium, CPI, that's now alive for 1.5 years, 2 years, that really wants to change the way we design and use plastics throughout its entire life cycle. And I think also the past 6 sessions have shown that, and I want to come back to that later on, because we're moving, and we can show some facts, let's say some road, how do you say that? Some road signs that it's already happening. We want to boost circularity on an international and industrial scale. So there's a lot of talk, there's also a lot of action, but we really want to boost it on an industrial and international scale. Of course, Netherlands, we're in the Netherlands, but not limited to that. We also want to expand into Europe and the world, because we do need level playing field. It's been mentioned before. We're going to build the CP community, the circular plastic community, and we wanted to use this first series of the CP conference, the Circular Plastics Conference, to do that, and I think that worked well. I think people got to know each other, they got to learn who is doing what much better, and I think that helps to build that community and build effectiveness in that community. So we looked at a lot of things. We looked at technical items. We looked at development of the chain. We looked at harmonization, standardization, regulation, and legislation. We looked at all of them. And I think, again, what we brought is that awareness has grown within the community. The neural networks have grown in the community. And I think everybody's been much more able to make connections. So I'm very happy with that. As mentioned before, some of the road signs that we are on the move. Actually, today, we issued a pre-proposal to the NWO, the Dutch Research Foundation, and it's called Food Packaging Reset. We are stubborn people, and we said we want to find out a way to really keep the functionality of the molecule in the food packaging to its main functionality and recycle it in mechanical recycling, 10 cycles. So we want to look at different material groups. We want to look at the techniques of doing so, but not burn it, of course, not leak it, not burn it, don't chemically recycle it, but use it in mechanical recycling. And if there's anybody who has not been involved yet, please come to see us. We will organize a workshop within the next 2 to 3 weeks to really build that community to a strong community, innovation community. Next to that, and parallel to it, we are competing to the national growth funds, the Dutch National Groeifonds, with the NPPR, with the National Platform Plastics Recycling. We launched that the 4th of February. That was the first session. We have developed in that, and we are targeting an issue or to submit our proposal in September. So we will use that food packaging reset to get more into contact with the companies, but it's an open invitation to everybody in our network to join us and to help us write that proposal. We're targeting 250 million of investments. This is along all the TRL levels, so the TRL 1, 2, 3 fundamental knowledge, but also the pilot scale and real scale installations. Tomorrow we have a sounding board meeting with the National Platform Plastics Recycling with more than 50 companies. So yeah, and like I said, everybody's welcome to join it. So as far as I'm concerned, CPC was a great success. And as Ronald mentioned, we will continue that in 2021 with a live conference. But of course, between May of 2021 and beginning of 2022, sorry, I said 2021, there's a lot of months. So meanwhile, we will continue to build this community. We will continue to develop connections and topics to connect on. So if there are topics that your company is struggling with, bring it to Ronald Korstagni as the program director or others from the CPI, and yeah, and give us a chance to work on that.
That were your final words, Jan?
No. I have a few more. Oh. So not too many, but a few more. And now I'm closing down. I want to thank CFlex, Plastics Europe, and TNO for co-organizing. I wish to thank all who contributed on screen for their contributions. And of course, as Ronald, I want to join Ronald in thanking the organizing committee behind the scenes. A good friend of mine taught me the best tagline for circular plastics economy. He always simplifies it to recycling. He says, recycling is a team sport. The team involves everybody in the chain, including the consumer. We've talked about that, and everyone overseeing the chain, including the government. And I think we see it as our duty to really connect those and to really make it happen in the entire chain. And I have a vision. Most of us are parents. And as a society, we've fought for health, we've fought for peace, we fought for safety, and we've won them, and we've attained them. And right now we are fighting for good use of resources and more or less above ground mining, I always call it. So don't drill it, don't mine it, but seek it above ground. And I think we will come to a certain stage where the society and hence the end user will also police the way we're going to use it. So of course, we will get the violations, and we will also get the recycling criminals, and we'll even get the recycling terrorists that, in the future, and that we will fight off as a society. So I see us as a joint force where we will all together with the NGOs, and I thank you guys for your messages today, together achieve this target, because in the end, we're all parents, we have generations to come, and we're responsible for that. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for building up the circular plastics community. We need all, because recycling is a team sport.
Okay, thank you, Ernst-Jan, very much for your final words. And normally I would say, okay, let's go to the bar. The bar is open, but your promise that next meeting will be live, and then probably we will see each other at the bar. Okay, thank you very much for attending, and have a nice evening. Bye.
Thank you all.